All right, moving into the work session this evening, Dr. Ballinger, over this budget.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Oh, so we're going to talk about one of my favorite subjects, and that's
ponies. You have attitude discussions of that. Yeah, keep in mind it.
I am passionate about school finance. I love school finance, and so I enjoy any time I get an opportunity to talk about school finance. And so, in our presentation tonight, I'm also going to be soliciting the support from some of my team members. So there'll be some different slides that you're going to have some different speakers on. This way we can, this is a group effort throughout our development of our budget. So I also do want to thank the budget committee for the work that they put in and the discussions that we have had concerning our budget. And I know we have another budget committee meeting coming up here next week, or after I had to look back at the calendar, but I think it's support market, maybe. So, yeah, so we have another one coming up here pretty soon. We'll be talking more, just kind of see where we're at. Hopefully we'll know a little bit more with the state budget. So, all right. So Virginia Code outlines that it is the duty of the division superintendent to prepare, with the approval of the school board, the estimate of the amount of money deemed to be needed during the next fiscal year for the support of public schools of the school division. This budget is a needs-based budget that is student-focused, is responsive to our collective needs now and into the future, and is in alignment with the school division's strategic plan, goals, beliefs, mission, and vision. So when we look at our why, we need to understand that we are here to serve our students. We are here to serve our school community. And Warren County Public Schools, we exist because of our community. Educational institutions, I believe, are service organizations. And so we do provide that service to our community on a daily basis. And we need to keep our students a center of all of our decisions that we make every single day, from the teacher all the way up to the board. And as long as we stay student focused, then we know we're always making the correct decisions on a daily basis. So our budget development process, as you can see, there's a lot that goes into it. We have everything from our cost centers. We send out a request typically in October. We're actually sending out the documents to our cost centers in October, to where I'm going to stand up a little bit so I can just move around you. Sorry, I want to make you stand harder. Okay. So we send out information to our cost centers so that they can help develop their site budgets. Looking at staffing, looking at non-labor. Also, we review our strategic plan. We also, at that same time, review data such as enrollment. We review where we are with numbers in classrooms, class sizes, numbers when it comes to our special education department. We also look at school board priorities. We look at those staffing needs and projections that I just talked about, capital improvement plan or capital plans, school board budget committee. When we discuss and we look through everything that's presented, we kind of work through some things. And also when we look at our cost centers, they present our budgets to the executive budget committee, and then the executive budget committee reviews all requests, and we kind of formulate something. And as far as our timeline, this is a long process. It starts in October and it goes all the way until we have a budget approved. I think 2 years ago, it was June 29th. We approved one. That's typically too late. But you can see that information is sent, again, kind of what I'm repeating here. It's sent to the cost centers. It's prepared. They present, budget committee reviews, We review categorize priorities, we review the governor's budget. That typically comes out in December. Usually around December 20th is when the governor's budget comes out. Then we go through our executive budget committee as we prepare the cost or estimated cost for what we're looking at. We review then the Senate and House bills as they do crossover. We hold a public hearing. Then, of course, I'm doing the proposal tonight just to kind of talk to you. Again, the final will not be until the March meeting for the board to approve. This is just for informational purposes. Then again, we do have the budget. Once it is approved, it's sent to the Board of Supervisors. They do their thing on their end with advertisements, and then they finally come back and give us an appropriation. And at that time, we either adopt the budget or we look at our budget and have to make edits if we have to, or increases where we're at. So also, when we look at our budget development, we do look at our strategic plan. So I haven't included our strategic plan with our objectives here as part of this presentation. So we have these 6 categories: instruction, climate, culture, family and community, safety and health, technology, and transportation. I'm not going to go through all the objectives, and that they are on our website. And I'll touch on some of those as we're going through this presentation. Also, when you look at our goals, these are the goals that are tied into our strategic plan. We do want to make sure that students will graduate from Warren County Public Schools. We want them to be able to think critically, think creatively, communicate effectively, collaborate with others, and be prepared to enter the workforce. And then there's a lot of other ones. You look down at safe and reliable and equitable transportation system. We have technology listed there. We do want to provide an all-inclusive school experience. So there's a lot of different goals that we look at as we're developing our budget. When it comes to budgeting, one of the things that we do have to keep in mind is that the composite index is really what helps drive our budgets. And when you look at the composite index, this determines the local government's ability to pay for education and for the costs that help support those standards of learning with local funds. So that a composite index is calculated using 3 criteria. So you have true value of real property, and that's weighted at 50%. Then you also have adjusted gross income weighted at 40%, and then taxable retail sale weighted at 10%. So when you look at the chart up here, you can see that Warren County has the second highest ability to pay out of all of the neighboring communities. So with Clark being at basically 60%. So what this is saying is that in Clark County, their locality should fund 60% or more of their education. Here, they're saying Warren County should 45% or more of the education. And that's really what that's looking at when you're looking at those breakdowns to pedestals. Another piece of our budget development is, again, our number of students that we have in our schools. Now, this is a little confusing. So those numbers, you'll see that is 4,851. That is ADM that we're funded on. Now, we did put down at the bottom that we also have 153 students that do attend our schools that are not counted in this funding formula. So we have our pre-K students and we have our special ed regional program students. That adds up to 153. So when you add 153 to the 4,851, I believe that's 5,002, 5,003 students or 4. So we do have other students that are in our buildings that's not counted in that number up there. So you just have to keep that in mind when you're looking at that number. So yes, we are over 5,000. Here's a little bit about your school system. So this is our vision: learning through inspiration, engagement, empowerment, and innovation. Every student, every day. We do want to focus on each student's needs. And we want to make sure that we are meeting their needs on a daily basis. 9 schools, we have 1 technical center and 1 non-traditional education program. Again, over 5,000 students. We have 802 staff members with 591 teaching professionals. They're also within your school system here. We have 63 career technical education courses. We also had, out of those courses, we've had 226 students complete or be completers. We offer 21 dual enrollment courses. And just this last semester, there was over 2,084 credits earned. That was in fall of 24. So just last semester, 2,084 college credits earned. We have 93% on-time graduation rate with 36% of our graduating seniors will have a advanced diploma. We operate 35 bus routes with 7 car routes. We transport over 2,300 students on a daily basis. So when you're looking at that number of 5,000, we're right there transporting just about half of our student population. Also, we drive. We drive over 385,000 miles a year. That's a lot of miles. Now, Warren County, as far as our geographic footprint, is not big, but we transport a lot for students. Also, just some nice interesting facts. Since we've moved to free breakfast and lunch at all of our schools, we serve over 3,100 breakfasts and over 3,300 lunches daily. That's a lot of food. That's also addressing some of those needs to make sure that if families or students are experiencing any insecurities with food insecurities, then they're able to get that at school, without cost. So we are removing some of those barriers to education, because we know that a lot of those students, you can't learn if your belly's sitting or growling. And so being able to have that food available and offer that to our students, it's a plus. Also, just wanted to throw this out there. Over the summer, again, we served over 2,000 meals, breakfast and lunch. So 2,000 breakfast, 2,000 lunch. That's a lot of food that we're providing to our community. So we are a resource here in our community, and we are serving our community. So now I'm going to get into a little bit of the revenue side of things. And again, this is just a bar chart that just shows historically kind of where our state funding has been. So this is looking just at state revenue, and we'll get into the actual numbers later on when we get into our breakdown. But you can see a nice little trend line there. Our local revenue, this is the localities piece. So state revenue is what the state sends us. When you look at the local, that's only what we're getting from the local appropriation from our governing body. So that's what this chart looks at. Our federal, again, this is federal revenue. You see that spike? That's back during COVID, when we received all the CARES funding and other funding, for the pandemic. And then our miscellaneous revenue. Miscellaneous revenue, that covers everything from where we take care of the cars for the county. So they pay us for Mr. Mitchell and his team to do that. That's miscellaneous revenue. So that goes in here. When people rent our facilities, that's miscellaneous revenue. So that's how we track that through miscellaneous revenue. So then when we look at our state revenue versus our local revenue, this is just looking at trends and comparing over years how our state revenue versus our local revenue has tracked. And so you can see just on the bar chart, it seems like we're getting a little more state than we are local at this time. I did provide a line chart this time to kind of look at that from a different perspective. I know a lot of people like bar charts. Some like line charts. But I would like to note on this chart, if you look at how it is tracked from state revenues versus local revenue, you can see in 2022 that there has been a larger disparity between local revenue and state revenue. As the state revenues continue to increase, our local revenue has not kept up with that pace. And so that's why you're seeing that widen out at the end. I would also like to just talk about a little bit, when we look at our state revenue, it has increased over 41% over the past 5 years, where our local revenue has increased 8% over the past 5 years. Also, when comparing And just looking at this chart where we were last about equal, staying there, and that's 2022. So from FY 2022 to FY 2025, and I'm looking at this section right here from here forward. So that's what I'm comparing. So just for FY 2022 to FY 2025, our state revenue has increased 23%, where our local revenue during that same time has only increased 3.5%. And so we're seeing that it's causing that a little disparity as far as when we're looking at what we're trying to do and what we can accomplish at the school level. Then we have our debt service. Debt service, that's bonds. Again, for buildings, that is a dedicated revenue that the county receives. They pay the bonds, so we don't see any of that money. And then this chart here, it looks at our county revenue versus local funds for operation and debt service. So what this chart does is it takes our operation, because keep in mind, our operation, that's our bread and butter. That's what we need to survive on a daily basis. Debt service, that's not something that we live on. We don't even see that money, but we do include it because that is a cost to our schools. So this chart looks at, if you look at the blue bar, that is our debt service with our operating. Then the orange, that's property taxes. And then the gray, that represents the county's overall revenue for the year. So if you look at 2012, there's a little similarities as far as how far apart those are, but then you can see that as revenues have increased, how property taxes and other taxes that have been received have increased. We're not seeing that big jump with our, for the school systems. Again, this just kind of shows where we're at with our debt service included in our operation, and kind of as we were closer together in 2012, how things have just continued to grow and divide. Now, this next slide here, I take out debt service because, again, I talked to you that we just live off of our operation. Our operational budget, again, is our bread and butter. That's our daily. That's the salaries. That's our non-labor. That's what we operate on. And so when I remove the debt service and then, again, just look at operational, you can see a bigger disparity between as we see taxes, more taxes coming in, more revenues coming in. Again, here is a revenue chart. So this looks at county revenue versus local funds for school operation. And again, all this data is just taken from the audits. So we have this data from our audits every year. Mr. Valentine has those, and we do pull this information. This is a new slide, and this slide is what we look at here is the percent of the total county budget. So that's the school's percent of the total county budget. And that includes everything. So that's saying how much of the total county budget is the school budget. So that includes our state revenue, that includes our local revenue, that includes everything. Historically, since 2003, Warren County Public Schools has been about 60% or a little over 60%. So it's anywhere between 59.9 to 60 point, I think 61, 62% is the most that I've seen. But you can see in 22, we got down to 52.6% of the total county budget. Then the next year at FY23, we've dropped down to 50.8% of the total county budget. And currently we are setting for this year, with the numbers that we have, we're setting at 49.5% of the total county budget. So that percentage has decreased, specifically really over the last 3 years if you look at the trend data. And then again, when you're looking at this slide here, again, is the local appropriations of the total county budget. So we're looking at how much the county locally appropriates to the schools from their budget. And that's why you're seeing it's about 25% back in 04, and it kicks up somewhere around 2011, FY11, that it's about 30%, and hovers about 30% But then again, over the last 3 years, we have seen that, we have noticed that decrease as far as when it comes to what portion of the local appropriations are going to our schools as far as the Cole County budget. When we look at our salary and incentives or initiatives and personnel, again, the first thing we're going to do when it comes to our budget, we got to take care of our people. I know there's a lot of sometimes confusion out there within the community, thinking there's a lot of places to cut. Our workforce is our budget. Our non-labor is a very small portion of our budget. So when you start talking about, hey, we need to cut, you're talking people typically is what you're looking at, and services that are being offered. So we always want to take care of our staff. All employees right now, because our initiatives will assure the 3% increase, at least inclusive of a step. Teachers are going to get a 3% plus a step. That's what we're at least projecting right now. Our instructional assistants, we did a scale adjustment. Bus drivers, we increased to 5 hours and did a scale adjustment. Speech therapists, a scale adjustment. Registered nurses, a scale adjustment. Student support coach, a scale adjustment. BHSL coach scale, and supplemental and miscellaneous scales. Also, some of the other benefits that we have, you guys approved the sick leave payout last year for teachers and instructional assistants. We do have an impact on, impact of probable benefits. What we're looking at for the impact on our health insurance, right now we're figuring that at 10%. So when you see that impact of probable benefits increase of 10%, we are trying to get our number, but they keep telling us it may not be till March till they tell us what our insurance rates are. And we can't control that. So we have to project, and right now we're projecting at 10%. Of course, we have comprehensive health care coverage. We have multiple plans. You can read those. We have core contributions. So WCPS does cover us a portion of monthly premiums, which is beneficial to helping us to hire people because insurance costs can be expensive. Again, we had dental and vision benefits along with dual employee discounts. And then we have an SAJ, a health savings account. So getting into the salaries a little bit deeper here. On this slide, what we have here is we take every scale, the number of people, and then we are projecting what their salary would be with either the 3% inclusive of the step or 3% plus the step for the teachers. What we have down at the bottom, remember when I talked to you about scale adjustments? So that is to pull that out so you can see what impact that has when we did a scale adjustment. Now, I do want to make note that if we did a scale adjustment, we didn't do it 3% because actually the scale adjustment is typically a little bit more than the 3%. And so they get that because of the scale adjustment. So for instance, if you have, and what I'm talking about with the scale adjustment, if you have 30 years on your scale, we take off the top 2. That means everybody moves down 2. So they're getting 2 steps instead of just getting a step with a 3% increase. So when you remove and take a scale from 30 years experience and you condense it to maybe 25 years or you condense it to 28 years, that moves people up the scale quicker. And then that allows them to get a higher salary range. Again, when you look at this, our total number there is $66,713,464 when it comes to our salaries. And that's with everything that we talked about with our initiatives and with our scale adjustments, with the 10% increase that we're projecting with health insurance. Now, Rob, I don't think I'm missing anything. Am I on that? Do I cover everything what this sheet covers?
I think that covers it. The amount on the health insurance, that's just the employer's share. The employees pay their share too, so the total cost for health insurance is a large number.
So as far as our initiatives with personnel, we did have some of our held positions last year that we had to hold to make budget meets, to meet our appropriations that we had. So we took those positions and we looked at those, and then we also had from requests from administrators this year to also take into account some of the things that we needed to address as a school division. And so as we went down here, we said, okay, some of our positions we still need. We still need them in those schools. But other of those held positions, we said, hey, we can repurpose those, because when we looked at, for instance, some schools' class size numbers, and the class size numbers didn't show that we needed that teacher at that elementary level. So therefore, we are repurposing that position and say, let's do something else with that position. So it's not just adding positions. So we're being cognizant of what positions we have, and we're making sure that we're utilizing our vacant positions to the best of our ability to be fiscally responsible. So for instance, at E. Wilson Morrison, there's still a need for that teacher. We had to hold one of their teachers, their class sizes were up. We know we have a group coming up into a grade that only has 3 teachers. They need that 4th teacher. Otherwise, those numbers are going to be high at E. Wilson Morrison, which is a school that requires our K-3 class size. They're one of our lower schools, so we really keep the numbers down at E. Wilson Morrison. They're also our highest when it comes to our free and reduced lunch count. And so we do need to make sure that when we look at equitable funding, that we're putting our money and the people where it's needed the most. And so we do need to keep that teacher there. Warren County Middle School, and that special education teacher was at E. Wilson Morrison, but in conversations with the administration at E. Wilson Morrison and with special education, we know we have a group coming up into Warren County Middle School next year that's going to increase special education services. And so we don't have that need at E. Wilson, so we're moving that position to Warren County Middle School. So we're not saying that we're going to keep that position at E. Wilson and add a position at Warren County Middle School. We're repurposing it to another school. HJB, the Tier 3, that stays. We are seeing those numbers there. We feel that position needs to be there. LFK, there was a teacher that we held at LFK this year, a position. It was a make-it position again, remember. Again, looking at numbers, I'm not seeing a trend. I think we're okay. I've talked to the administration at the school again, just looking through where we're at. They feel they're okay as well. So instead of putting a teacher back in, we want to repurpose that into a reading specialist. Because our goal is to get 2 more reading specialists. That way every elementary and every middle school will have a reading specialist to implement BLA. But repurposing that teaching position to a reading specialist, that to us it's a need, but it's also, again, being fiscally responsible. Ressie Jeffries, again, taking that K teacher that we put on hold last year and repurposing it to a physical education teacher. Because we know that specials at Ressie, we need to add specials teachers. And that when you say specials, it's not special education. Specials are PE, art, music, those positions. So by adding that physical education teacher, that's moving us in that positive direction, because Ressie Jeffries is our 3rd largest school. AS Rhodes, taking that free K teacher, and again, we're going to repurpose that to that 2nd reading specialist that we need. So again, it's not adding an additional position, it's just repurposing that held position to meet a current need that we have. The Styline High School ag teacher, we still need that ag teacher. Right now, we have kids on a wait list. We have kids that want to take that course. They can't take the course because we can only offer so many sections with 1 teacher. So that ag teacher needs to stay in there. And then again, Skyline Middle School teacher and special education teacher, there's still a need there for those. Again, I mentioned about the special education teacher at Warren County Middle School. Same thing as Skyline Middle School. That's why we're going to leave that special education teacher there. But then there's also a need for an English teacher right now at Skyline Middle School because our numbers are pushing the limits. Standards of quality allows us 24 students per English teacher, 6 through 12, and we're pushing that. We're at 24, 23, 24. One or two more. We're too close to where then we would have to do something in mid-year. So we need to address that now, just because of our numbers. Then we look at our additional positions again. Blue Ridge Technical Center, we're asking for a special education teacher Division Y request. So these are additional positions above the L positions. A translator or ELL teacher. Then we also have or need a nursing coordinator, and then we need a public information officer. When we look at our pay grade adjustments, there again, and I'll go into this a little more in detail, but we're looking at a software specialist to a technician scale, looking at a dean of students to a principal, increased part-time secretary rate, and then a line school counselor coordinator stipend. Retain student support coaches and student support instructional assistants. We'll get into that topic a little bit here later on, but it's important for us to have our student support coaches, and I did reduce that a little bit. So we did have an additional, right now this year, we had an additional 7 positions. Trying to be responsive, and if we can hit the two reading specialists, and then that way we can have a reading specialist at each school, then that's going to help with running those programs, and I think we could do that with the 8 bachelor and the instructional assistants when it comes to our student support coaches. So let's talk about our justifications. So here's where I'm going to talk about each of those positions that we just mentioned. So our held positions, they are needed to reduce our class size, meet mandated requirements, provide student support. Also, the L positions, when we had to hold them, what did they do? They caused larger spot sizes in some cases. Also, it did reduce our ability to provide program offerings, and it reduced our ability to provide specific student supports. And again, I mentioned it here, some held positions have been repurposed or transferred to meet current needs of the school division. When you look at this, there were 6 teachers between elementary and secondary and 3 special education teachers. Again, this aligns with our comprehensive plan, Section 1, Objective 1, Section 1, Objective 3, and Section 1, Objective 4. So they do align with those goals within our strategic plan. Our student support coaches and student support instructional assistants. These positions came through with our CARES money. We have been able to manage over the past 3-4 years since that funding came available to be creative to keep them. Now that money is running out. So these positions have been funded through various grants. They were shifted to focus on one-on-one and small group remediation with the implementation of the VLA this year, so the Virginia Literacy Act. Beginning of the year, VALS testing and grades K3 found that we had 527 students requiring a reading plan. That's K3, 527 students. Next year, VLA will include grades 4 through 8. So now it's going to be K8 VLA. So we're going to need the supports there to help make sure that we're implementing this. Those students that aren't needing benchmark will also require an intervention plan. So we want to make sure that we're providing that support for one-on-one and small group. And in some of those intensive groups, they limit the size of students that you have or that you can have in there so that you are making progress. And so we need to make sure that we have the hands-on, the staffing available, that we are able to provide that one-on-one small group setting to where we can move our students. Again, that aligns with our comprehensive plan, Section 1, Objective 1. And I did put some data on here just so that you can see how we've progressed just from beginning of the year to mid-year. So when you look at the high risk, our fall numbers, for instance, let's just look at that first grade division total. High risk, there was 145 students that were identified at high risks. Mid-year, there's 114. So we've moved some students down to the moderate risk. or maybe some who jumped even to the low risk. So that means we're moving students in the right direction. When you look at grade 1 at moderate risk, there was 103 that were identified as moderate risk back in the fall. Now we're down to 77. So we have moved approximately 30 students with small groups, one-on-one, and other things that we're doing, including with the student support coaches and just the reading program that we have with our classroom teachers, some curriculum changes. We're moving our students. Low risk. Now this one's just the opposite of the first two. You want to see this number go up. So if a student's in low risk, you want that number to be higher. That means we don't have to do a plan, or maybe that is an intensive plan, but
No plan.
no plan. So if they're low risk, it's no plan. So you want to see a lot of students in that category. So first grade, when you look at it at the beginning of the year, we had 111 students in low risk. So we had 111 students that did not need a plan. Now we've jumped that up to 168. So we've moved a lot of students in the right direction. And I did want to make note, the asterisks at grade 3, division level totals, we still had 2 schools when we got this data that has not completed all their vals mid-year assessments. And so that data is skewed. It's not complete because we don't have all of our schools presenting their data. When we look at our reading specialists, 2 reading specialists are needed to effectively implement and provide support to students on a reading plan and to effectively implement the BLA. Current staffing splits our reading specialists at our schools. By adding 2 reading specialists, all elementary and all middle schools will have a designated reading specialist. You know, we have a vacancy right now, and so we had to adjust this year. So both of our middle school reading specialists are slipping down right now and helping to cover some elementary schools and our middle school, just because we're a little short. But that is not an effective program. And so we want to do what's best practices when it comes to our reading intervention program. And so we are looking at making sure we have those reading specialists, because that way they can help with the implementation and run that reading intervention program within the schools. So it's important when we look at that to make sure our program is solid and that we have the supports there in order to allow students to move from high risk down to low risk. Again, this goes in with Section 1, Objective 1, Section 1 and Objective 3 of our strategic plan. Special education teacher at Blue Ridge Tech. BRTC supports students on an IEP. There's a need for a designated special education teacher who can work with students and staff in the building and help implement, support their IDP requirements. Again, this aligns with our comprehensive plan, Section 1, Objective 1, Section 1, Objective 3. Physical education teacher at RESI's. RJES is our 3rd largest school with the number of students served. There is a need to provide additional staffing for specials, PE, art, and music. There is a need for an additional PE teacher for the FY26 to help address this growing need. Again, this aligns with our comprehensive plan, Section 1, Objective 4. Translator, ELLs. Again, when you look at this, our numbers have grown. From 2020, we've went from 153 EL students to 256 EL students this year. When you look with this growth, there's a need to support students and families of our EL population. Strong school and home bonds help to ensure student success. Again, this aligns with our comprehensive plan, Section 1, Objective 1, Section 1, Objective 3. Our nursing coordinator that we need. Demands on school nurses are ever changing, and there's a need to have a position that able to support trained nurses on a regular basis. This position will help ensure consistent best practices and effective oversight of our nursing program. Again, this aligns with our comprehensive plan, Section 4, Objective 3. Public information officer is needed to ensure that communication and information are current, consistent, and timely across the entire school division. Communication is key component to the school division, and to have a dedicated professional will help us maintain and support the entire school community. So again, that ties into our comprehensive plan, Section 3, Objective 1, Section 3, Objective 2, and Section 3, Objective 3. And then pay grade adjustments. This again is to better align the responsibilities of the job and to improve efficiency while streamlining services across the division. And again, it aligns with our comprehensive plan, section 1, objective 2. The next slide we're going to get into is our non-labor. So when we look at our non-labor, one thing that we went through was a Title I audit. And through a Title I audit, they wanted to ensure that we had equitable funding between our schools. And when we looked at it, there were some schools that were receiving this amount versus this amount. And so we aligned that to say, okay, we're going to give a dedicated amount for each school per student, which one, it helps that school to budget for next year so they know exactly what they're going to get. It helps us to budget next year. So what we did is we looked at FY 2015 and we put in what their budgets were back in 2015. So that's 10 years ago. So if you look at Ressie Jeffries back in 2015, their budget was $64,549. In 2025, their budget was $65,897. So in 10 years, their budget had moved up about $300. Ressie Jeffries has been requesting, not just this year, but they've been requesting for the past few years around $75,000 to $85,000 because of the number of students that they have, the number of supports that they have. So we did put their request on there. Now, when we look at this, how we're going to fund per pupil at the elementary, middle, and high schools, Ressie Jeffries would receive about $81,000. So it's not what they requested, but it does move them into where they're at, where they need to be. And you can look down at all the schools. Wilson, they moved from $48,000 to $50,000. You can see the request. AS Roads has moved about $1,000, or not quite $1,000, about $800 over the 10-year period. LFK, they moved about $1,200, $1,300 over that same time period. When we look at our per pupil expense, we wanted to make sure that we are adding growth to this because we know that typically inflation is going to be around 2%. That's what we want to, that's what they're saying. It's 2%. I mean, we were just talking about 3% for our mowing company. But if we're not building 3% into our schools, I can tell you copy paper in 2015 is not what copy paper costs now. So what has happened is our schools' ability, their purchasing power has drastically reduced just because of cost of services, cost of products. And so our principals are having to make decisions on, well, we can't do that because we have to buy this. And so it limits and takes away from the classrooms when we see that our budgets become stagnant over a long time. So building in this, it is a 5-year projection, and over that 5 years, it's only a 5% increase over 5 years. So that's really 1% each year. So for the first year, FY26 and FY27, for instance, elementary would be $125. So this year and next year, we would budget our schools at $125 per student. In FY28-29, it jumped up 2%. So it goes from $125 to $128. Then in FY30, and if you extend that out to FY31, it would go up 1. And so you'd be at $129. So over that 5-year period, you jump up $4 at the elementary level, and then you can see at the middle and high school level. And again, doing this at our schools, you'll see the impact that it does have on the overall non-labor budget. And I believe it's about $80,000. Is that right? I think it's $83,000. $83,000 so by doing this model versus what is being ripped out. So when you look at our non-labor funding as far as for other departments, so this does not include any of the elementary schools. This is all of our departments. Now it does have Blue Ridge Tech and our ALTED in here. I'll just highlight a couple of these. So assistant superintendent, you see that increase of 117,000. That's a projection of 5%. We are going out for bid for our Sodexo contract for our janitorial. So we are anticipating an increase. So we are budgeting for that. When you look at technology, $633,000. Again, I'll let Mr. Stefnosky talk to you more as we get into the justification pages that kind of outlines the increases there. But our costs just continue to rise. And the programs that we're implementing, refresh. Again, I don't want to steal any of Mr. Stefnosky's thunder here. I know he's resting.
You also.
Our substitutes, again, you guys just saw that we're up as far as year over year of the number of people that are able to fill spots. So that's good that we're getting subs in the building, but it's bad for the budget because now you're paying more people. So if you go from a fill rate of 71% to a fill rate of 81%, you're paying for that because you only pay when you fill the spots. And so as we see that fill rate go up, that means that cost is going to go up in association with that. Another one on here that I'll point out, $192,000 for instruction. So we also have some leftover all-in tutoring, or what is that one?
All in Virginia.
All-in Virginia money. So there's about $175,000, I believe, of what we figured. That is the pot that we were paying a majority of, we were paying all of our student support coaches with. But we do have to buy materials because we're moving VLA to 4 to 8. So we have to buy materials for reading interventions and things of that nature. So that money will be used, but that we already have. So that's an increase there. The negative $666,000, that's where the county is talking about taking over the bond payment for Ressie Jeffries for the renovation. So we are removing that revenue because they have to give us that revenue. It doesn't matter whether we pay it or they pay it, it's got to get paid. So if they're going to pick that up, then they're not going to give us that $666,000 for it when we're out paying it. So we do show that as a decrease there. And then if you look over to the right, you can see that at the FY25 approved non-labor budget was 11,542. The proposed non-labor budget per pupil allocation is 11,622. So a difference of 80,000. Then the cost center request, and then just the difference we were looking at is $666,000 when you add it all up. So now we'll get into some justification. So I'm going to ask Mr. Stefnosky to come up and he could talk about technology.
Dr. Ballenger highlighted that requested $633,000 increased technology budget. All of these requests here align to the comprehensive long-range plan for what's Section 5's technology and Objective 3, which is really about making sure we have a robust and secure infrastructure for learning and communicating within our school system. The first part of the request is just having a built-in E-rate match. I know you hear we talk about E-rate a lot. It's really just about providing our internet services and the technology that we need for the equipment for internet service. So when looking at those kind of things, a lot of it is stuff we would have to pay for anyway. And since E-rate provides that discount, I think that would just be good for us to have that built into the budget. The second part of the request is for our phone system upgrade. And really, I could have put the phone system upgrade down into the refresh needs because those two chunks right there are really about just making sure we have funds in there that could be used to buy any of the equipment that we need. In this particular case, when we're talking about the phone system, just to be clear, our phones work. We use Cisco phones, but our phones are way past end of life. So what happens is we don't have any support services. So if our phone systems went down and we could not solve what the problem is, we have a phone system that would not be functioning. So that would, as you can imagine, be a huge security concern for our school system. So this right here is just an estimate. I tried to pick I tried to pick a low estimate so that we can kind of get an idea what we would need to be able to upgrade to make sure we have a phone system that's functional, start moving towards a system that we can have some longevity with. And then the last part is really just talking about having something else built in there so that we can be fresh. Schools are constantly asking for having, new interactive displays or smart boards. We talk about having cameras. So I just listed a whole bunch of things that we just need some funds so that we can kind of have an ability to replenish these things that we need within the school system. And also just to cover the rising costs of services. Typically things rise. We're looking at our big three, which is Power School, our firewall, and our content filter, which we account for our students. Those things between the years of 2021 and this last school year, just those three alone have risen $40,000. So we've kind of been trying to, as he was talking about with having diminished purchasing power, it's one of those kind of things like we had to cut some other things this year. We're at the point now where there's not really anything else to cut. So I just wanted to highlight those for now.
Thank you, Mr. Stefanowski. Now ask Ms. Bragg for instruction. Yes.
Hello. As Dr. Ballinger already sort of pre-briefed, the biggest request for the instruction budget overall, about $192,000 increase that we're asking for. Approximately $100,000 of that would go towards the purchase of a universal KA screener for both English and math. The purpose of the universal screener is so to provide skills-based normed data. It would be it's a nationally normed process, and that gives us a indicator of where our students are on their skills K-8 across the county, to have those common conversations about where our students are and how they are performing. With the VLA, we know that K2 will be required, every student will be required to take the VALS screener. So this is still an approximate cost because there could potentially be some adjustment. We don't want to over test the students. If a test is already serving that purpose, we don't want to give them another test. But certainly for grades 3 through 8 and for math, the need to have that understanding of where our kids are, a midterm assessment, and then also a final assessment as far as where they are on skills. Universal screeners oftentimes can uncover some things that even though a student is performing well in the class, they're getting good grades, that sort of thing, but they may have some skill deficits that are sometimes difficult to see in like just the grading of the course. The other piece of the universal screener is that we want the accompanying supplementary piece that allows for that differentiated lesson. It goes that one step further. Continuing to test the students to know that the student has a deficit in a skill in math or English isn't going to move the needle. We need to have those supplementary lessons that point and help direct teachers to how to address that student's needs so that we can fill those gaps. Oftentimes what, especially, as our teaching staff is, either new to the profession or in different modes that we're hiring in, they recognize that the student has a deficit, but their toolkit may just not be large enough to address those deficits in different ways that the student needs. So they're teaching the skills, but it may not be getting that gap filled. So those supplementary lessons can help provide some of that differentiated support in order to meet those students where they are. It also gives us the progress monitoring piece to see that to monitor their growth. So that's the biggest sort of chunk. Dr. Ballinger also mentioned, I'm going to skip textbooks for just a second. Dr. Ballinger also mentioned the carryover from the VLA in order to purchase more supplementary and intervention materials, and that's required by the Virginia Literacy Act that we purchase from the VDOE list those supplementary and intervention materials for grades 4 through 8, which goes into full implementation next school year. The other piece of the increasing cost of services, as was mentioned, was technology and paper and some other costs. Our continuing purchases each year, our continual contracts, they're running approximately 15% more each year. So our Mastery Connect, which is our assessment software for benchmarks, some of the programs that we use to roster our textbooks, things along those sorts of nature are running about 15% more. Also, we pay the Virtual Virginia bill out of the instruction budget, and that bill has consistently been over $100,000 each year to cover the cost of our Virtual Virginia attendees, and it is on pace to increase about $13,000 this year. So that number continues to grow. Kind of circling back to the textbooks. So for instructional textbooks, they're in a separate fund for the textbook fund, and I believe Dr. Ballinger explained that there would be money placed into that line item, but as part of the instructional justification, I just wanted to reiterate the importance of being able to have funds for those textbooks. We are looking at both a math and social studies purchase for next school year. And then Blue Ridge Tech has requested about $20,000 to maintain and replace equipment and services, purchase curriculum aligned to the courses at the Blue Ridge Tech Center in order to keep up with changing standards, programming, that sort. Anything else?
Thank you, Ms. Bragg.
Yep.
And now I would like to invite Ms. Drake up, talk about human resources.
Hello and good evening. So my justification for HR, I'll start with our timekeeping system and maybe start with a little joke that the Flintstones kind of want their chisel back. We are still using a paper system, which is really not effective when you're looking at a timekeeping system and having to track everybody's hours to make sure that we are in compliance with those state, local, and federal law. So having an electronic timekeeping system would be very beneficial to our payroll specialist who has to go through every single paper timesheet. Not saying she makes errors, but it is really open to human error anytime you take a pencil and pen from the employee to the supervisor approving to payroll. So this would streamline that process. It would also help us track accurate hours. And then also, we do have an integration fee. It's a one-time fee going from the system into our payroll system. So that way it will just upload. Oh, all right. Oh, there we go. I see what I'm talking about. And then we have Power School. So this is about $60,000, and this is investing in additional capabilities that Power School does have. I think it's important that we already have a system established. It's very user-friendly with our employees. The current evaluation system that we have is not, and so we would like to move forward with the evaluation system, and then also the professional learning system for development and the online training modules. So we did have Fred Scott and Dr. James Strange, I might be saying his name incorrectly, but they were the engineers and created the system. They came and did a demo. We did have our IR team a part of that to make sure that it was actually comprehensive for them. So we would be able to eliminate a system that we have, which is through another vendor, to be able to use that money towards this as well. So if you're doing any addition from what I'm asking for, it is off because we can use those funds that allocate it towards this. But I think the online training modules are very important. So if we have an employee that's struggling in a specific area, they can go ahead and we can kind of recourse, redevelop them in that specific area, and it's specific to them. We just don't have a lot of those available now outside of maybe an additional cost to have to send them to that. So this is just a great resource. If somebody just wants to improve themselves, they can sign up. These classes are a part of that program. All right, and then I get 2 pages. My last company, HR didn't have a budget. Now I do, so it's kind of nice if approved, right? But this is really important to me. So when we look at our strategic plan, and HR really falls under everything, right? Anything that deals with humans, human relations, human resources, right? we are a part of that. And so when you look at our strategic plan to recruit, employ, and retain our employees, right now we tell our candidates coming in that we have chosen to hire, they have to pay $27. They have to bring in cash or a check to pay for their background. I think for a candidate experience, when we are telling them that and they haven't even been board approved to actually start with us, I would like to see us take on that cost. We currently take that cost on for our volunteers right now. So I would love to see, this is an estimate. Hopefully it doesn't go above that because that means we're hiring a lot more people, but would like for us to take on that cost to them. And then our substitutes. So Dr. Ballinger has already talked about that increasing. I did look at some numbers because he stole my thunder that, we have this request to fill is, 71 to 81%. Which is great. That fill rate's wonderful. It would be nice if we didn't have to have all of that, but just in January, we had over 20 employees out on short-term, long-term FMLA. And that's almost $30,000 just in January in subs. It's not just call outs. It's not just illnesses. Like these are people that are unexpectedly out. And so that, just naturally that's going to increase because we can't predict those. So would like to increase that budget as well. Right now we're at like 823,000 and it would go up to $1 million. Thank you.
Next, I would like to invite Dr. Costner.
Okay, offer up, we have check. Yeah.
I will. Board members, thank you. I just want to kind of briefly go over our increases. As you can see, the transportation is requesting a 9.19% increase this year. The justification for that is, first of all, we want every child to get to school safely. That's the bottom line, and that's the way it's set up. And as you know, fuel costs probably going to go up. So we have to account for that. Now, following directly with our strategic plans, we want to make sure, like objective one of our strategic plan is vehicle purchases and maintenance. The parts that it takes to repair our vehicles, that's going up. We do need a new lift to help so that our folks can get under to work on the buses and everything. The current lift we're wanting to replace was purchased, I believe, around 2002, so that's correct, 2001. And so we are wanting to replace that lift. And then objective two of our strategic plan is to make sure that our routes and our stops are safe. And that's why we have included in here, we need to continue to update our routing software. And that's actually one of the policies that we just were reading through, talks about making sure the route description is on the bus. So we are wanting to make sure that we continue to update our routing software so we can also meet the policies too. Objective three of our strategic plan is to update our bus radios, systems, and procedures. And so that's the reason for our percentage increase for transportation. Move over to food services. Food services actually encompasses all of our strategic plans. If you think about this, we serve meals to our students. They do an outstanding job of serving these meals that students enjoy. So when you have a student that wants to come to school, we're improving attendance. If we provide those meals and the different fruits, anything to keep giving them choices, well, that costs. And as you know, there is an increase in our in food services right now, not food services, but supply. We also, to be able to cook and prepare this, we have to maintain our kitchen equipment. So that's why the food service asked for an increase. One of the things we talked about is, we have talked about adding a walk-in freezer, updating those and adding a walk-in freezer that gives extra storage. When you purchase food in bulk, you have to have places to store it. So therefore, when you can purchase in bulk, your price can go down. So it's kind of a cost benefit to help to do that. Let's talk about instruction. Instruction, one of the objectives in our strategic planning for instruction is to improve our SOL scores to where we have 9% or higher. We all know that students are going to test better when their bellies are full, when they feel good. Sitting here, some of us maybe getting hangry, because nutrition helps. It helps you through those things. And so that's one of the things, the same thing when we talk about the increase in food, the cost of food, the cost of preparing it. We've talked about family and community. That's another one of our objectives in the strategic plan. Thanksgiving dinner, give you all a flashback of that. You know how great it was. Oh, there's a cost to that. Having a program in the morning time, like donuts for dads or something of that nature. We're able to bring in food that's good. But let's talk about eggs. You know, when this first went out, the cost of eggs went up, was 32%. I looked it up just a few minutes ago. The cost of eggs has increased by 50%. So an egg, I mean, you know, prices are going up that we cannot control. So that's why our food service is asking for that price increase. The last one to talk about is our custodial services, and Dr. Ballinger did touch on that. We are submitting an RFP to, we're working on that to get bids to come in now, but part of the contract is a level of cleanliness. If we want to make sure that we have a set level of cleanliness because we want students to come to school, we don't want the germs are being passed around. We want to make sure things are disinfected, cleaned appropriately, and taken care of. So we got to make sure to do that. That also falls in line with our safety and healthy, clean environment, which is part of the strategic plan. So that's the reason for the 5% increase that we're asking there.
Thank you, Dr. Costa. And now we're going to let Rob talk about revenue, and he did provide an easier document for you guys to look at. On here, it's 3 pages, so I'll try to keep up with Rob for everybody that'll be viewing this later and everybody out here, but he did provide the board with a nigger sheet to look at.
Did that skip us one? Nope. Okay.
Data fountain Chris?
Mine might be out of order. There.
Actually, you're right. There's a slide that went missing.
Oh.
There's a slide that is gone, Rob. So, I will try to find that. We'll get that in there, but
We'll move on, and if it can pop up there later, we'll go back to it, because it sort of summarizes what we're going to be talking about here anyway. So if we look at the state revenue projections, right now, of course, we don't have a state budget. This General Assembly is still in session, and they will hopefully adopt a budget, and hopefully the governor will sign it, and they'll know before the June 29th time that we had getting our budget 1 year, what the state revenue is, and that, of course, is important and helpful. The sheet we've got here that is showing up on the screen is the first part of the longer one you have there, the left side, which is our state revenue projections. I've got what our approved state budget is for this year in the first column, running down to the bottom, and it's $673,848. The next is the approved state budget for this year. When the General Assembly, when the state approved the budget last year, it's a 2-year budget. So it's not only for this year, but it's for next year. So if that budget were not amended or changed, you can see down at the bottom we would get almost level funding from the state. The reason being is our membership has dropped, and we have to adjust our budget for that. Then the next column is the amendments that the governor proposed to the budget, and that goes down to the bottom. But then what I've done is the House and Senate bills have additional money included in them beyond what the governor did in his proposed budget. So I've shown that, and both of those are exactly the same, $1,059,894. And I called DOE because the finance office, I've never seen a state budget where the House and Senate and what they propose or pass is exactly the same. Usually you have the governors as one number, House is another number, Senate is another number, and they come together and come up with a budget. But in this case, they're exactly the same. They're distributed a little bit differently, the programs and things, but again, the total number's the same. So if that were approved, what the House and Senate bills contained, the total state revenue would be $42,789,505. So the next frame we'll look at will be the right side of the wide sheet you have. That's our federal revenue, miscellaneous, and then any transfers in and out. And the big differences here you can see coming down the page there, about the middle of the page at the bottom of the miscellaneous revenue. We used to receive, or we did this year, and it has to have a qualified energy conservation bond rebate. That's part of the energy savings contracting we did a number of years ago. And some of that savings went towards renovating RESI. Well, the county has said, or at least been given an indication, that they would take over that bond payment and basically be paying all of the school bonds. So if they do that, we would see that $666,000 reduction in non-labor, but also the reduction in that revenue. They would keep that to help go towards the bond payment. And I guess bottom line, when you get to the bottom line there, the county appropriation to balance our budget to the number that's shown on the summary sheet that disappeared, our total budget would be $79,409,455, which is a $3.2 million increase over this current budget, but would require, because of the loss of the per pupil funding from the state for the all-in per pupil funding, would require an increase in the county appropriation of $4,276,356.
And Rob, I found your slide, so
There it is.
does for that.
So that slide is a summary of the budget that comes up to the $79,409,455. Excuse me. So what we've done here is compared what the proposed budget is for next year with all the salaries and benefits that we've talked about here previously in the presentation, all the positions, and compared it to what it is for this year. Then the additional positions we're proposing for this year, the 409,814 last year, well, not last year, this year, we have 362,358 in additional positions included. And then those enhancements that we spoke about would be $82,637. We didn't do any enhancements this year in the budget, so that's zero. And then our non-labor with that per pupil allocation that we talked about and any adjustments, in particular the increases that we talked about, brings the total budget to $79,409,455, which, as I mentioned, is a $3,215,466 increase over this current budget.
Thank you, Mr. Balladar. And then as far as when we looked at our proposed revenue reductions and reallocations, such as Mr. Balladar just mentioned, that all-in per pupil funding, that's $1.5 million. Then one thing that we're also moving out of what has been historically in Warren County in the operational budget, we receive, the county does receive textbook money, but that has been included into the operating budget in non-labor for approved expenditures. So there are things that we have been purchasing. That's why when Ms. Brack says that there hasn't ever been any money or, it was never put in the textbook account. We have a textbook account, and I have, since I've been here, been trying to start to build that up, but I've just never been able to get that money transferred over to where it could start accumulating, where we'd be able to purchase the textbooks when we need to purchase textbooks. This removes that $426,000 out of the operating and puts it into the textbook fund. So when we look at our textbook fund along with our child nutrition fund, we would be requesting $4.33 million for child nutrition, and for our textbook fund, $426,973. And then we're almost done with when you look at facilities, here we're requesting $875,278 in facilities for next year as a capital improvement. $50,000 of that is to upgrade the management system at 5 schools. We have 5 schools left that we need to update that for management system. On our schedule, HJB is scheduled for a shingle replacement on the roof. That's $366,000. And then we are recommending that we renovate tennis courts at one of our high schools. The good news is we did find another vendor, and we did get a quote that took that down. I think the cost, the original bid was about $700,000, correct? And you can see that we've gotten that down to $459,000. So we were able to get a lot cheaper quote on renovate tennis courts versus what we had earlier. So Mr. Howlick, I want to thank him for reaching out and doing his due diligence and trying to find us another vendor to get us an additional quote for that. So that did reduce what the tennis sports were going to be. So that would be $875,278. And again, these are just some pictures of our tennis courts. They are a safety hazard. It's going to get to the point to where we will not be able to participate. You have to remember, we do have community members that use our courts. The goal would be to also implement pickleball on as we renovate those so that they could be used more by our community. But you can see there that we do have some issues at our tennis courts. So I want to thank everybody for listening to this long presentation. Again, this is a needs-based budget based on the needs of our students and staff. There is no decision that needs to be made tonight. But now, at this time, we will entertain any questions that you have. So we'll try to address any questions or that you have concerning our budget. For both.
I have a question on the it's way back on slide 27, but where you were talking about moving a pre-K teacher, just somebody different, right? Specialist to a reading specialist at AS Words. I just had a general question. Are the pre-K teachers completely out of our budget? We get some money from the Virginia Preschool Initiative.
No, that's still within our budget. And I did talk to Ms. Vaca to see what she was projecting from the state next year, and it was the same. And so she said that, yes, we could reallocate that teaching position. But no, we do receive in our funding, I think if you look at, let me get to that. You'll see on there, Rob, you want to point out where preschool initiative right here? Yeah. So it is on that sheet. That's where the funding for pre-K comes in. So it is still in our operating budget.
I'd like to just sort of reiterate what I said last meeting, which is, we have a increasing budget, increasing requests with a decreasing enrollment to some degree. Something looking at saying the Board of Supervisors, obviously, they're the ones that are going to need to make a decision about our requests. And then we're going to go up $4,276,000. That's going to affect a taxpayer who is a taxpayer already worked up about a lot of things, rightfully so. So it's just something I would highly recommend, having plans B and C, as we've mentioned in our budget committee. People say, well, if we can't get this, what if they do flat fund this again? What do we do about it? So it's great. I do believe the needs have been well presented of what they are, and I'm glad that many of the the strategic planning goals were brought into that, so that's a good thing. But I do think it's going to be in this time and where we are, it's going to be very difficult to get another $4 million for the Board of Supervisors for local funding. So just sort of be cautious about where we're going and be able to have a good landing for the other options. That what could it be? What may have to get rid of, and it could be, even though they're great requests, but might be have to get rid of in order to, if they flat budget it, fund this again.
Yeah, I would like to joke on that as well with the psychology of budgeting. I know I say it every year, and I know my words are never heeded, and then we never get our money. So maybe this year we try a different approach, and instead of asking for the world, tone it down and ask for the absolute critical things, because what I suspect is going to happen is the Board of Supervisors is going to get this ask of that's almost $3 million. And they're going to say, have a nice day, you get nothing. It needs to be pared down an insane amount to find the absolute critical things. The county doesn't have the money. They don't have it. It's not that they are choosing to deprive school children. They don't have the money. So any additional ask is going to come from the tax-paying citizens who are already furious about increased values. So I would highly suggest you try a different approach so that way we don't shoot ourselves in the foot by getting asked. It's too much. I won't harp on it. You're going to do whatever you're going to do, and we're going to get wherever we're at. So it doesn't even matter. Where in here does it show a line for how much we get for the meals tax? Like, do we have a specific amount that comes in for that?
Well, that comes in, my understanding is that comes into the county. Yes, we don't.
But it's supposed to only be spent on capital improvement projects. And let me take you down the rabbit hole that I'm on at this. Because for those who don't know, historical data on this, in 2003, there was a referendum vote in Warren County. And I pulled the language on it. It is very specific that meals tax money is to be spent solely and exclusively for capital improvement of schools. Now, has it been? I won't say what I suspect, but I want to see specifically, and I know we might have to get that from the county, but maybe we need to request it. I want to see specifically how much is coming in so that we can better track exactly where that money is being spent. So that hopefully it can help with our budget in those areas.
I do know originally, back in 2003 or whenever that was done, that it was earmarked for school debt service.
Okay, so is that...
And it was put aside for school debt service, particularly the building of the two high schools that were completed in 2007. And, back then I remember seeing the numbers and seeing how much, of course, the debt service was much more than what was brought in. So it was being used for that. And the debt service is still larger, I'm sure, than the meals tax. So
Yeah, I was looking out.
somehow the debt service is getting paid, that money's coming in, and more is going out towards debt service. Whether it's that exact stream of money or
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was looking at their total life expenses the other day, and as we know, certain school renovation projects, I find them to be questionable. We're renovating a stadium that is, yes, it's the home field for both high schools, but it also is used for other purposes. The issues surrounding the library and how that money was spent. Finding out that Villa Avenue was technically renovated with the intention stated when we got the money that it was going to be used by the schools, and yet we don't get to use it. I just want to make sure that the schools are getting their fair share. So I think we need to track that money closely. Otherwise, I had other questions written on here, but I'm not even going to ask them. I don't think this budget's gonna have a chance at passing as it is. So I'll just let us move on.
this is a needs-based budget based on the needs of what I feel is there, that it is pared down. And let me just explain this to you, that you take all that stuff out, you don't have enough just to get teacher raises. So you're going to have an ask from the county. So that's just where we're at. And I think one thing I would like to point out, when you look at the slides of the discrepancies concerning local revenue to state revenue and the percentages that have gone, that gap, as Mr. Ballantyne and I were talking, that gap is where we're at. If that trend line would continue, we would be in a different situation.
That and actually, like, since we're gonna get into it, fine. Get into it. That was actually one of my notes. So that's actually not a true representation of data, because just because the state has come up with additional funds, the state tax base comes from the entire state, which a lot of that draw comes from the big money in Northern Virginia. That's a good thing when we see that that revenue coming from the state is increasing, and that Warren County is getting to take a bigger piece of that pie from a tax base that is much more well off than we are. The state has run with a surplus for quite some time now, and to get to have that money directed to Warren County is great. That local amount of money, which has steadily gone up with a little tiny dip in there, that's us. That's our taxes on our homes. And when I look at the median income in this county, and I see that people are talking about the fact that they are going to lose their home if their mortgage goes up, and they are on fixed incomes, and we've got, less than 20% of the county actually has a child in public schools. It's unfair to use that statistical data of the state being more generous with the funds from the rich areas of the state and extrapolate that to mean that our Board of Supervisors locally is doing something that's detrimental to us. I say this every year. A budget season doesn't go well. We create an adversarial relationship with the people you're asking to get the money from. So maybe we try something different this year. Maybe we don't. You're going to do what you're going to do. So
I don't. That is representative as far as with the comparisons to how local revenue has trended with state revenue.
it didn't work out last year. I called it last year, and it didn't go.
Any other Austria?
It is what it is.
I think something that would be helpful for us to have as well, and it might have been presented in here, especially for when we have our reading on the 25th with the Board of Supervisors, is also just to highlight what state money will depend on us matching that or adding money to it. Because I think it's important to remember that some of that state money is going to be tied to us providing this increase in salaries. And if we can't achieve that, then that state money is going to disappear. And so I think we just need to know that not getting the increase from our local funding also directly will decrease our state funding.
I wanted to make a similar comment, because when you see that graph where the state funding is going up, I mean, I can see how naturally you would think, oh, well, the schools are getting more money, so you're better off. So we probably don't need as much from a locality. That's mega science, but okay. But when the state gives us money, they're also requiring us to increase teacher salaries, among other things. We have to hire these VLA positions. And so those increases are offset by their increases in funding, but they're not completely covered by that. So even though the state funding goes up, to a large extent, we have to spend that money, and usually more, on increasing teacher salaries, which is important, and I'm glad that we can increase teacher salaries, but that leaves us a smaller piece of the pie to do everything else, which is why I think, what we've heard about our non-labor budgets, they're not going up because we have to continue spending more and more of that local revenue on only salaries, because the local revenue is not going up, and the state is requiring us to increase our local match to receive the state funds. So, I mean, it is going up from the state. We are able to pay increased salaries to our teachers, which I think is needed, but it does not really equate to our budget having more money in it for anything except that one thing. The way it's set up. It's step in if I'm mistaken.
Okay, so I'll just take this opportunity to remind the public that our next public hearing on the budget is going to be at our March 5th meeting, and that meeting starts at 6:30 and it's at the Government Center.